Good afternoon and welcome to CC Gurukul lecture. In today's session on symbolic expression, we have with us Ms. Manisha, who is going to interpret the lecture in sign language. The topic for discussion for today's lecture is Peter Berger's construction of social reality. Peter Berger, along with Luhmann, has written the book The Construction of Social Reality. This is a seminal work in which they try to understand how knowledge forms and how it is preserved and altered within a society. Written during the 1960s, at a time when C. Wright Mills wrote The Sociological Imagination, this book is significant in terms of understanding how individual makes sense of everyday reality. Peter Berger was influenced by phenomenologist schools and uses his understanding of shared meaning. So, sociology of knowledge refers to the ways in which individuals in society create and maintain reality. How do we construct reality? Or how do we kind of make sense of everyday interaction, the way in which individuals interact and create what we call a social order? How is social reality constructed at the individual and societal level? One way in which individual gives meaning to everyday life is through communication. Communication involves interaction between individuals and provides a patterned social order. Knowledge is then the accumulation of the interactions that takes place in society, and this accumulated knowledge is passed down from generation to generation and helps us legitimize the understanding of society. To understand construction of social reality, Peter Berger uses the concept of habitualization. Now, how do we construct is the reality? Once the reality is constructed, individual accepts it, and the way it accepts, it is also accepted by other. Once it is accepted at the individual level and at the societal level, it becomes a habit. So, society is in fact a habit. Berger and Luhmann argued that society is created by human and human interaction, which they call habitualization. Along with habitualization, he kind of describes any action that is repeated frequently becomes cast into a pattern which can then be performed again in the future in the same manner and with the same economical effort. This is the quote from the book, The Construction of Social Reality. So once we do it at individual level, it is repeated by others at the society level. It becomes a part and parcel of society. It becomes like something which is known, which has been occurring, and therefore a habit. A second concept along with habitualization is institutionalization. The people face various choices. It is the way we handle them. And when habitualized, give rise to institutions. So every time in any kind of social interaction, there are multiple options given to individual. But individual prefers one choice over the other because it has been existing prior to them. It was something which was considered as correct and something which will not disturb the order of the society. So once a particular habit is kind of considered as followed by the average members of the society, it leads to the formation of institution. Institutions arise where there is a reciprocal typification of habitualized action by types of actors. Institutions control conduct. Why? Because every institution has a predefined pattern of conduct. Each institution, whether it be school or an office, will have a set of rules and regulations. Now, what does this rule and regulation do? It tells us that this is the correct pattern of behavior. So, in that sense, it tends to discipline individuals in society. Institutionalization of social process is gained through mutual observation with subsequent mutual agreement on the way of doing things. Everybody has consented that this is the correct way of doing things, and those who do not follow the rules within the institutions are then labeled as deviant and subject to some kind of punishment. The third concept to understand construction of social reality is legitimation. Peter Berger and Thomas Luckmann argued that institutional world needs legitimation. Legitimation or legitimacy is very close to power, or what is kind of accepted as correct pattern of behavior, and it is also many a time the use of power or a hegemony that considers a pattern of social action as correct. We give meaning to the institution through the process of remembering and interpretation. Effective institutionalization will require less coercion. So, in situation where everybody accepts the pattern of behavior, it is institutionalized. You will not require any kind of power or force to make people go by the rule. It is only in situation where people deviate from the accepted rules and code of conduct that force is required. So, force is required to kind of give the meaning that particular social action is legitimate. People do mostly what they are expected to do. Legitimation is built by and is expressed through language. The logic is part of the socially available stock of knowledge and taken for granted. So, when we have understood the construction of reality, it is important to understand what kind of reality is constructed. According to Berger and Luckmann, it is an ordered reality. Social reality is human made. That's what it means when we say it's constructed. It is made by people. We are living in a world is designed by us, and human people experience it in a highly ordered reality. The reality around us is very complex. It's all in disorder and chaos. But how do we experience it? We experience it by placing ourselves in a particular context. So, we place ourselves in one category of gender, caste, community. So, reality is filtered through our individual experience. The social construction of reality means that individuals collectively create an objective reality, whose objects they designate and arrange in ways that make sense to them as they subjectively experience that reality. So, for Peter Berger, reality is both objective and subjective. Human beings use language to construct labels and maintain an ordered social reality. Now, this ordered reality is the reality of everyday life. And this everyday life is the sphere that impinges upon human existence most intentionally and immediately. So we know that there is a caste system, there is religion, but we are not familiar with the entire complex of caste system. We are only familiar with that part which affects our everyday life. So in that context, our experiences will be different. So everyday life contrasts with other spheres of reality. It's different from the world of dream, from the world of theater, and kind of say, if we are kind of reading fictitious novel, it takes us into a different world. Our everyday life is different and is considered by a person to be objective. So we will be able to understand that part of the reality which has affected us. So we will be objective. And when we share that reality with someone else, it becomes subjective and is self-evident. The social interaction in everyday life favors personal face-to-face encounters as the best scenario where human beings can actually connect with each other through interaction. Human beings can actually connect through communication, and language, symbols becomes the machinery through which we are able to connect with others. So the world which is constructed, the everyday life that we live in, is a shared world. We kind of share meaning, we share the actions, behavior, legitimate pattern of action of everyday life. The social reality ranges from ordinary language to large-scale institution. So social reality is kind of very complex. Our whole lives are governed by the knowledge about the world that we have, and we use the information that is relevant to our life. So we have lot of knowledge. We kind of have almost a full body of knowledge around our society, but we are not able to use all of them. We only use that part which affects our life. And how do we kind of make this distinction? We do it with the help of language. People understand knowledge through language. What is the function of language? Language helps create shared symbols and stock of knowledge. And participation in these things inherently make us participate in society. So we have said that according to Peter Berger, social reality is both objective and subjective. At the subjective level, people find personally meaningful and created by human beings in aspects such as personal friendship. As I already said, the reality which we share with with friends, with colleagues, with relatives is subjective. Why? Because it will have multiple realities. Whereas the reality which is very specific to an individual would be objective. So at the objective level, people find realities such as government bureaucracy, large corporation, where reality is seen more out of one's control. Objectively, social order is a product of our social enterprise. It is an ongoing process that results from human activity. Institutions are product of historicity and need to control human habitualization. And what is habitualization? As I already said, it is the repeated behavior or pattern. Everyday reality which is repeated over a period of time, across space, becomes habitualized. And once it gets habitualized, it leads to the formation of institution. And it is there where subjective reality comes in. So when we look at society as both objective and subjective, we realize the shared nature of the experiences as individual level and at the community level. Many behavior lose sedimented institutional meaning. Institutional order involves specified roles for people to play. Now, when he's talking about the construction of social reality, he is talking about three interrelated processes that helps in the construction of reality. The first process is externalization. Externalization in the sense that reality is external to us. External to us in the sense that a number of social reality is independent of individuals' birth or death. And externalization implies a process in which humans pour out meaning, both mental and physical, into their reality, thus creating things through language. In externalization, social actors create their social world and it is seen through action. The second process is objectification. Objectification, reality becomes established by the product of externalization through the course of objectification. That is, we need to see reality from an objective lens. And it is here he says that sociologists may have multiple values, prejudices, but one needs to see the reality with the help of an objective lens. That implies that we kind of maintain scientific integrity in understanding reality. People see either a social practice or an institution as an objective reality that cannot be changed, such as something like language. So language will not be affected irrespective of our opinion about it or how we are kind of trying to change it. So the third process of construction of social reality is internalization. So for Peter Berger and Luhmann, social reality is both external and internal. Internalization implies that reality is undergoing change. It's not the same. So the newly made and man-made reality has an effect on humans themselves. So there is a dialectical relation between society and individual. Just as individuals are affected by society, society gets constructed through individual actions. Internalization, the external objective world, to person becomes part of the internal subjective world. As social actors, we internalize norms and values, accepting them as given and make them our reality. The next idea that he talks about is the image of society. He mentions in the book that the first image of society that comes out of social reality is that of a prison, in which man is subjected to many pressure. If society is to be seen as a prison, its walls have been constructed by the occupants themselves, who at times seems to behave like puppets. So when we kind of go by taking for granted assumptions without critically questioning the reality, we would be considered as puppets in a prison, where our freedom and agency would be restricted. But it always doesn't happen like this. Since people play their roles following their own will or wiles, as the case may be, society is not like a prison, and individuals are not always like puppets. Rather, society is like a stage or theatre. This comes in from the symbolic interactionism perspective, where it is argued that society is a stage and each one of us are playing a role. So it can be like a theatre or a circus or a carnival, and each one of us has a specific role to play. In that context, society can be seen as a drama. Berger brings Erving Goffman's idea of society being a drama. For Goffman, humans are just characters and role, specific ones based on the group that society has given them. The reality of the drama is essentially a morality play in the sense that actual actors behave morally and sincerely, but their behaviors may be cynical too. All in all, to a great extent, society is a result of conspiracy. Peter Berger is also talking on religion and on modernity. He talks about how religion is born as a collective response to the threat of disorder and chaos. For Berger, the search for meaning is anthropological necessity. Religion are the compass that provides an explanation for everything that surrounds the world of humanity. Historically, religion have been sacred framework that humanity has built and turned into a protective barrier against the vulnerability of human conditions. According to Berger, religion is characterized by constructing of a sacred cosmos. Basically, he is trying to examine the relation between religion and everyday relation. And this everyday reality, religion helps us to transcend and establish a boundary between the sacred and profane. The sacred, in Berger's understanding, is a kind of mysterious and imposing power that can be attributed to certain object, places, or even periods of time. So, profane is something which is everyday, we are doing it every life. But sacred is something which is specific, something which kind of separates from everyday life. It is extraordinary. Religious rituals helps us to remember the experience of the sacred world in order to recreate the original mystical character of society. In his work, The Sacred Canopy, Berger is saying that religion provides a shared universe of meaning and used by people to make sense of the world that they live in. He refers to religion as a sacred canopy stretching over society and helping people to cope with the uncertainties of life. So he is also talking about the religious cosmos and the way in which religion helps us to create a universal symbolic cosmos and make us differentiate between the sacred and profane. He talks about secularization and bring forth Weber's theory of rationalization. He talks about secularization as kind of removing religion from institution and symbols due to the process of modernity and industrialization. With these understanding of religion, construction of social reality, Berger has helped us to understand the way in which we experience reality and how sociologists understand this reality. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.